Well, and that's the interesting thing, right? Without time, you couldn't do these things. We couldn't synchronize, and synchronization is so important for civilization, and yet it's potentially the thing that gets us back to this root problem, which is we now think we can master this thing called time. And as I think we're learning, if you try to master time, time will master you. So
Right.
we need time to have a civilization. We can't really synchronize it because of the success of civilization. Ergo, we try to gain control over it by mastering it, some of us more than others, and we end up feeling like we can't. And I love the way you point out the flaw in the logic of the story about the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. Which
Yes.
I mean, I've always thought I lived by that thing. I know my rocks, I know my pebbles, I know my sand. Maybe explain to folks what that is and why that might be a fallacy.
Sure, yeah, right. If there's anyone on the planet who hasn't heard the original story, which is, I think, probably reproduced in 1,000 time management books, it is this anecdote, has different versions, but it's basically, in the one I know, I think a professor arrives in a classroom one day with rocks, some large rocks, some pebbles, some sand, and a big glass jar, and he challenges the students to fit all of this stuff into the jar. And the students, who have to be kind of dumb for the purposes of the story, right, start putting in the sand first, and then the pebbles, but then the rocks don't fit. The pebbles first, then the sand, the rocks don't fit. And then he very smugly points out, no, look, if you put the big rocks in first, then the pebbles and the sand nestle in the spaces in between. The moral of the story is, if you make time for your biggest priorities, then you'll get them done and you'll have other time for other things. But if you don't, first of all, make time for your biggest priorities, you won't find time for them because all this other stuff will fill up the finite space. And it's actually just true so far as it goes, right? There are kind of decisions to be made between things that really matter and things that don't really matter. But I think much more importantly is that it's a scam, right? It's a rigged demonstration, because he has only brought into the classroom the number of big rocks that he knows can be made to fit into this jar. And I argue in the book that I think the problem that we have as humans, but especially as humans in the modern world, the real problem that we have is that there are just far too many big rocks. There are far too many things that legitimately matter or could be said to matter. So there are certainly marginal benefits to around the edges, to kind of how you're arranging your day and making sure that you're putting in the important stuff and not spending too much time on stuff that doesn't matter. But the really big challenge, I think, is seeing that there will always be more big rocks than we'll have time for, and having the courage really to neglect a whole lot of them in order to focus on a few of them. Being willing, I think Elizabeth Gilbert says this, right? She has this great line about how we think that saying no is so important because if we say no to all the stuff we don't want to do, we'll have time for the things that we do want to do. But actually, the true art of saying no is saying no to things you do want to do in order to do some other things that you do want to do. Because deep, deep, deep in our minds, there seems to be this assumption that of some sort of natural law that says, well, like we're only going to feel that the number of things we're going to feel like they matter has ultimately got to match up to the time that we have. And it's just, it just isn't the case. We can feel that vastly more matters than we're going to have time for. And so I think that really goes to the heart of this idea that, like, figuring out what to neglect, being willing to let things go, waving goodbye to possibilities, this sort of very dark kind of disappointment that's baked in to any life, that it's sort of handling that is the big challenge, I think.